I'll stop recording.
You didn't say the magic word.
What's wrong?
Come on!
Do you need a chicken? More of a chicken?
Probably.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Good afternoon! Week! Good afternoon! Tough crowd.
We don't pretend to be.
Well, thank you for coming to my presentation. All right, so I want to talk about the business of operating in the world of cybersecurity. Before I do that, though, I want to get an idea of how many of you know who I am before the presentation. So, all right, so I'll run through my bio stuff so that you guys don't have to get bored to death, and I'll fill in a few details for those of you fortunate not to have been exposed to me before. And I do want to get some idea of where you're coming from, though. How many of you consider yourselves technical? Backgrounds in computer science, engineering, that sort of thing. How many of you are in roles right now that are engineering or otherwise technical? How many would you say are more operational? Anybody focus on policy? Anybody focus on compliance as opposed to engineering? How about risk management, abstracting even further? How many of you are reporting to executives, functioning at a level where you have to distill everything down? How many of you are way down in the trenches dealing with all of the bits and stuff? All right, well, this is good. All right. So, how many of you have military background? Very good. All right. So, a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about some lessons that I've pulled together and sort of abstracted from an experience that I had this summer. We'll go through each of these, and then we'll revisit them again at the end. Now, this is the first time that I have given this presentation, and I decided that this was a good place for me to try it because I figured that I had the greatest chance of finding people who had a background sort of similar to mine, who are most likely to be more of my peers. And so I'm looking for feedback on this presentation. I'm doing a bunch of other stuff that is just way too complicated for the audio-visual situation that anybody ever has, but I decided to push my luck because, that's just kind of what I do. So I am looking for feedback, and I'll appreciate any that you can give me. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Matt Curtin. I'm the founder of Interhack. We are a cybersecurity and what the lawyers call an expert firm. We're the ones that get engaged typically by lawyers or by people that are working internally at executive levels. Our job is not to deal with sort of the day-to-day security and whatnot, but is to deal with things where they have gone completely off the rails. So when you have a massive data breach, we're typically engaged on one of those kinds of things. But we're not going to be the ones that your insurance company engages. We're going to be the ones that the lawyers engage to make sure that you're protected in the case of things going completely bananas, in the case of litigation. I personally spend a lot of time on the stand as an expert witness. We work on cases that deal with cybersecurity as well as electronic evidence, so a lot of computer crime and that sort of thing. And what my team does ultimately is we identify where there is electronic evidence, we make sure that we analyze it, we apply rigid methodology to answer the questions that are put before us, and then it's my job to explain to a juror what all this stuff means so they can make an informed decision when it comes to what role they've got. Like probably a bunch of other people, we are buried And of course, it wouldn't be a presentation unless I told you that you need to, engage in some very interesting bit of history. So, for those of you again who don't know where I've come from, 1997, United States Data Encryption Standard, 56 bits, was broken by exhaustive key search. That would be my project. And that's the reason why all this crypto war stuff going on right now really makes me bananas. If you want to see a presentation where I go completely spastic, wait for one of those. This is the memoir that will show you some of the background there and get you going at least. So, there we go. All right, so the thing that I decided to do this summer was I attended a school that is run by retired Navy SEAL, Senior Chief Petty Officer Don Shipley. It's called the Extreme SEAL Experience. The course is run by an all-SEAL cadre. They are either active duty or retired SEALs. And the entire course is structured, basically there are 2 courses that I took back to back, and they are intended as what's called a BUDS prep course, basically. Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. A lot of the guys that go to this intend to go into the Navy and to go in with a contract that's going to get them on a track where they will go into BUDS and hopefully become SEALs at the end of it. The 2 courses that I took were called Advanced SEAL, and the other one was Advanced Operator Training. And during this experience, we basically looked at what it takes to conduct operations and what it takes to be a part of this community that conducts these kind of high-risk operations. The background of the SEALs does vary, and we do have some people that were involved in things like the underwater demolition focus, some others that were doing things like delivering SEALs to places underwater for demolition, others that were in the Tier 1 kinds of teams, like DevGru, the SEAL Team 6. There was another that was also, his last job in the Navy was in Red Cell. His job was to do stuff like sneak a SEAL team as hostiles onto a nuclear submarine, for example. When you think about a hard problem to solve, how would you sneak a SEAL team onto a nuclear submarine? Well, that was his job. So we went through all of this, and the way that it began was with Hell Night. We get up, we actually start operating at 7 o'clock in the morning. And in the course of that, we run through a whole series of evolutions, and it runs for more than 24 hours straight. That's the minimum. In my case, our class was up and operating for about 27 hours. And we're going to take a look at what that looks like. But first I want to abstract a little bit, step back, and talk a little bit about mission. When we talk about the mission that is being undertaken, it's the kind of mission that cannot be done with just one person. It's the sort of thing that requires a team. And if you've looked at anything from the SEAL community, any of the documentaries, any of that sort of thing, they're very big about the team. One of the things that happens during BUDS is they look for the people who are the superstars and operate by themselves. They don't make it. Star quarterbacks don't make it through BUDS as a general rule. They need people who can operate as part of a team and who are able to play their part and to let other people play their part. As we're going through all of this, there's a whole bunch of things that we wind up doing that ultimately are helping us to learn what it means to be a team and how to operate that way. We talk in IT a lot about teams, but the fact of the matter is, for the most part, we don't actually operate like teams, right? We got a server team. It's a bunch of guys that do the server stuff. Email team, a bunch of people that do the email stuff. But it's not typical that you have people who have developed a common, basic foundation where they are able to operate at a very high level, and then on top of that, develop specialty, where they each play their own specific part in this process. The video that we're looking at is all taken from the Hell Night experience. We begin things like, open water swimming and all of that. As we're going through this process, we began with a PT test. That's what we did in the very beginning. Google keeps wanting me to turn turn the slide question thing on, and I don't want it. So there we go. All right. So we go through this process. We begin with physical training to the point of exhaustion. Everybody is pushed to muscle failure. In that first 24-hour period, they quit counting after we had done 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, I don't know how many pull-ups. When we were running the obstacle course, we're doing all of this stuff in pretty much nasty conditions. It's hot. In my particular class, it was a summer class. It was hot. That mud that we were in, that stuff was stinky. That was like, seriously, there is stuff that is just like, making its way back to being part of Mother Earth, and it stinks. Everything that we're doing, those shirts, they started out white. Those shirts will never be white again. As we're going through all of this, we begin with the point where we have muscle failure. Everybody has got to that point of exhaustion. After we get to muscle failure, then we have to start running the obstacle course. When we start with the obstacle course, we are paired up. We get a swim buddy. You never get more than 6 feet away from your swim buddy. So, everything that we're doing is competitive. You have the ability to run, you have the ability to swim, you can go fast. Your swim buddy doesn't. Don't get more than 6 feet away from your swim buddy, because literally you depend on one another. The two of you learn to operate together. And that's the beginning of the process of building up the team, so that you recognize some people are strong at some things, some people are relatively weak at other things. One of the things the senior chief told us in the very beginning, nobody gives a crap in SEAL team what you're bad at. They care about what you're good at. So the big thing that we have as we're going through this process is we are trying to establish a baseline. Now we are going through this evolution after evolution, and we start finding where people are good. I was paired up with, as it turns out, another guy who was in computer networking. Log PT sucks, by the way. Does anybody ever have to do that? How heavy is that flippin' log? Yeah, it's approximately 1 billion pounds. And so you get like 5 guys or 6 guys have to carry that thing around. You get somebody who's not really into it. That doesn't work. That's my swim buddy right there, by the way. So anyway, we go through this obstacle course. We're going through the whole thing. This course, we've got 19 guys in it. The youngest guy was 15. And most of them, as I said, most of them, about 2/3 of the class, were specifically here to prepare to go in for buds. These guys are serious about becoming SEALs. So they're looking at me and it's like, okay, what's with you? I won, with my swim buddy, first place in the obstacle course. As in, nobody came ahead of us. I'll tell you the reason why. Is because as we were going through that process, the two of us, a little more mature, recognized the value of being able to work together. And we were able to support one another. As we would go through evolution after evolution, we were able to help each other with the things that the other was relatively weak in. Or if you just got a bad start to something. As an example, as we were going through the obstacle course, one of the things we had to do was run across this field. They call it the grinder. We've got kit, we've got this whole thing going on. We got to get up to a 6x6 personnel carrier. We have to run as fast as we can, get up onto the side of it, on the side, bring ourselves over the top, and then over the other side, back down again. My swim buddy did a good job. He got up really high. He was able to get over the edge. I got a bad hit coming onto the side. So I was up on the side and I was kind of stuck where I was. I was going to have to make another jump. So before he gets too far, I tell him I'm stuck. He steps back, he grabs me by the arm, he pulls, and that's all that I need to get up over the side. So we keep going. Next thing that happens, we go across, and we now have to deal with kettle weights. One's relatively heavy, one's relatively light-ish. Has anybody ever seen a light kettle weight? So we got to take them, and then we have to go across the grinder, around a tree, and then back again. So my swim buddy beats me to the kettle weight. He grabs the heavy one. He starts running. I get the other one, and I go by him, and he screams, "I can't carry this thing." I told him, "Get it to the tree and we'll switch." He gets it to the tree. He drops it. He picks mine up. I pick his up. I throw it over my shoulder. I scream like a maniac and run back across the grinder and drop it where it was supposed to go. And the last thing is we had to do throwing knives. There's a bunch of other stuff, but the very end thing, we also had to do throwing knives. If you don't get your throwing knives to stick and to stick into the target, guess what you get to do? More flippin' push-ups. We both got the knife thing to work, so we got to avoid having to do the extra push-ups. Now, the thing is, we had people that were faster than we were at each one of those things. But what we were able to learn in that process is that we had to succeed as a team or we fail as a team. The mission that we undertake requires a team. So think about, what does this mean to you in your job in cybersecurity? Most of you are like me, you're operators, right? You are down there in the dirt, you're dealing with all the stuff that's going on, and you have to make the pieces come together. It is your code. It will be your words on the report that make the difference. And so what that means is that you have to be able to rely on other stuff. Your bosses need to rely on your work product to be able to do their job, which is risk management or compliance or whatever. Those are the things that ultimately come together. In my role specifically, we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on. We've got a bunch of hard drives that need to be acquired. We've got data sitting out in the cloud. We've got to pull all this stuff together. It has to be done in a way that will be forensically sound. We have to be able to go through the analysis process. I have to confirm that everything has been done properly, because when it's my turn to sit there in the witness box and to raise my hand and say this is how it works within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, a statement I make upon pain of perjury, I have to be right. We can't have somebody who's a solo superstar thinking that they can do everything. Because the fact of the matter is, no matter how much background you have, nobody is diverse enough to be great at everything. It just doesn't work that way. So, our mission, when we are talking about security, whether we're dealing with litigation, whether we're dealing with loss, whatever it is, that is going to require pieces to come together. The other thing is that when we get into this business of a team, you remember when you were in college and you had that team exercise, the team assignment? How many of you liked having the team assignment? Almost nobody, right? You like having the team assignment when you get to pick your own teams, right?
Yes.
Because you pick people who know what the hell they're doing. And everybody dreads that assignment, and you have the one guy that nobody knows who comes to the thing and goes, I want to be the documentation person. Oh, fantastic. You can't code your way out of a wet paper bag, and that's the reason why you want to be the documentation person. It's not because you're great at documentation. Who's ever had a college project that required documentation and the documentation person was really great at documentation? It happens, but out of everybody in here, one person. Were you the documentation person, by the way? It happens, but it's not that common. The fact is that most of us in our professional lives, beginning with our college experience, are surrounded by people who are trying to avoid doing the thing they suck at. That's terrible. How are we supposed to succeed when we are working with people who are trying to avoid doing the thing that they suck at? It's not because they're actually good at the other thing, it's because they think they can fake it. The point is that we cannot say, oh, there's a team, I can hide there, somebody else will do the hard job. The team needs us. That means we can't slack. When we get to the point where we are actually doing whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing, we got to have our game face on. We have to be doing this thing for real. It becomes really important for us to make sure that we are not creating problems for others. So, it's really quite difficult to work on something like a data breach, where you can actually have enough hours, right? The clock is ticking. You know that regulation, that law requires that you make some reports at a particular time. And of course, everything goes a lot faster when you have your boss hanging over your shoulder going, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? I'm going to have to answer 45 email messages an hour from the boss asking the status. Doesn't help. The fact is we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to do anything twice. We're doing very well if we have enough time to do things once. So the team must be made up of people who are individually able to operate very well, and everybody is able to do their job, whatever it is, very well. So, absolutely no slacking involved. All right. The other thing is that we need to recognize that we have to train as we fight. You know, when we talk about what tools we're going to use, when we talk about how we're going to report our results, whether it's going to be a conference call where we talk verbally about what's going on, or whether we are having to write something up. How many of you have to write a report about something and you have no idea who the audience is? They tell you to write a report. How many of you asked to to write a report and you don't know for what purpose they're going to use it? Yeah, it's more common. You think you know your audience, but sometimes you're not sure what they're going to do with it. Or an email message. Anybody ever written an email message trying to put the pieces together so somebody can understand what's going on in the middle of crisis, only to find that it becomes a flipping exhibit in litigation? Who's been deposed before? How fun is that? Yeah, exactly. The nice lawyer smiles.
They're not. It's a lie.
You know, the way that you can tell the thing about a lawyer, right, is that the lawyer is the one who will actually, like, hold your hand and help you down to the ocean as he's feeding you to the sharks. They're very polite. But, it's sometimes difficult to remember that, they're feeding you to the sharks. Very important. So what that means is that when we're going through this process of training, we have to think about what is it that we're actually doing. What are we going to do when there is a crisis? What are we going to do when it is time for us to make the report, or to help somebody to make a decision, or to explain something? When we are going through the process of figuring out how we're going to do that, we don't want to be in the middle of actually doing that. We have to train for it. So our training needs to be built around specifically what we're going to be doing. We should be using the same tools. If we are going to be making reports, we should be doing so with exactly not just the same tools, but the same kind of format. The questions that we should be answering are the same questions that actually come up in this context. It becomes quite important for us, no matter whether we're talking about stuff that's coming out of the network, something that's coming out from, one of these things that, these endpoint security things or whatever, or if we're pulling stuff off of the cloud. In a lot of cases, it turns out that people see that there's a report that comes out of this thing. Oh, there's a report? Okay, fine. But the problem is, when we have the report, what do we do with it? So many times we get reports from our clients. They tell us, well, this proves that. Oh, does it? One of the nice things about being in my position is that I don't have a situation where I'm working inside of the company. So that in some respects, I don't have institutional knowledge. I don't know a lot of things about the particular product you're using or the particular version of the product that you're using. And that's the reason why I want to work with you, because you can tell me stuff about all of that. However, I work for whoever calls first. That means it might be, in a civil case, it could be the plaintiffs. It could be the defendants. I can be called by the court directly. In criminal cases, I could be called by the prosecutor. I could be called by the defense. I could be called by the court. All of those things have happened. What that means is that I'm just as likely to be looking at something to figure out how to undermine what somebody else wants to argue it means, if they don't have a scientifically firm foundation for their argument, as I am helping the client to figure out how to use it so that they can most accurately and persuasively present their case. So when somebody presents me the report that comes out of this thing, this means that somebody copied 100,000 files. Really? Is that what it means? Are you sure? Is there anything else that could make that report say that? Let's do the arithmetic. 100,000 files. How much data do we have in there? We add it all up. Oh, geez. Okay, we got 2 terabytes. And what was the period of time that we had all this going? It happened in 19 minutes. You're telling me you moved 2 terabytes in 19 minutes? Is that what you're telling me? How fast is your network? Well, riddle me this, Batman. How did that happen? How do we go from here? That's the kind of stuff we wind up getting into. Now, that becomes extremely important, again, in my context. The question is, what does it look like for you? So when we are going through the process of looking at those things, figuring out, here's what we're going to do with it, we have to train as we fight. We're going to run this report. We're going to interpret it this way. We're going to take that step. Because not until we've actually gone through that in training are we really going to get a good understanding of how strong we should be about our conclusions. The other thing that we need to keep doing is we always need to develop skills. I mean, how many of us are in the roles that we are because we like being in a context where we get to learn new stuff all the time, right? I mean, you ever talk to somebody who just graduated and they're like, oh, you know, I'm done with all that learning stuff. It's like, oh. Your career is going to be short and undistinguished. I think the marketing department's going to be looking for a phone call from you, Skippy. We have to train as we fight. We have to develop skills so that we can keep putting those pieces together. Developing skills is actually pretty difficult. One of the things that we got in this course that I went through, we spent a lot of time in close quarters combat. Close quarters combat is really something. It's way different from going to the range and sitting there with your 6-shooter. Pew, pew, pew. You know, it is not the same thing. We have to crawl before we can walk, and we have to walk before we can run. The thing about close quarters combat, you're training to enter a room, and you might not know much about what's inside. You might not know anything about what's inside. But you can expect that there are bad guys in there, and they're shooting at you. And also there are probably good guys in there that you don't want to shoot. We did all of our close quarters combat in a school. So, of course, they made all of the people not to shoot kids, you know, just to make sure that we clearly understand what we're dealing with. So as we're going through this process, we begin very slowly. Literally, they show us the footwork. Door opens, flashbang goes, boom, big bright light, and then you enter. We don't have anything in our hands, and they teach us how to walk, what we're doing, how to move the body, the whole bit. And we are literally walking slow, like that speed. Because the thing is, what they're looking for is they want to see stuff like which foot you're leading off of. If you have to pivot, are you on the right foot for that? Are you crossing your feet? Or are you avoiding getting yourself caught up? Those are all the things that you have to learn. Get those fundamentals down. Because slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. So you learn how to do that fundamental stuff. Then we get to the point where we start going in and we start having targets that we need to shoot at. So we get a bunch of targets like that mean-looking guy over there. So now you come in and everybody learns what their role is. So as you're coming in and you're entering and bang, 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 and then you're scanning and you're doing your thing, any target you're supposed to hit. That's when you are starting to walk. When you run, you start getting into target differentiation. And it'll be things like, all right, kill the triangles, don't hit any squares. And they start putting shapes on these guys. Then they start doing stuff just to mess with us, where they take the shapes away. And now we have to look at those things and determine if they're hostile. If there's a gun up that we can see, they're hostile. There is, the team ahead of me, I was stacked up outside of the door, and I was the number one man on the next team. And they just said that they were going to introduce something new. Hit the stuff that's hostile, don't hit anything not hostile. Team ahead of me, they go burst into the room, bang, 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 bang. The whole thing is over. If you're in CQB and it lasts more than about a second and a half, you are in big, big trouble. So the whole thing goes, and we can hear one of the instructors. I still hear that man's voice in my head at night, in my dreams. You killed the Bisquick! Is that a threat to you? Are you afraid of Bisquick? I have no idea what's happened. I can't see. I'm just outside in the hallway. I'm like, uh-oh. So then they all come shuffling out. It's like, uh-oh. So, and you can see the look on their faces, like, it's like, okay, this is bad. So what they had done is they took a couple of these guys and they just literally, they taped a box of Bisquick over the gun. So it's exactly the same target, but you have to be able to look and see that it's Bisquick or a magazine cover or something not a gun. And again, I mean, this has to happen fast. You don't have a lot of time for this. Because at some point, this turns into force on force, and you wind up with people actually shooting at you. That's, you know, okay, so when we're inside real close like this, we're using CO2-powered airsoft. That's enough to not want to get hit with. I've got a couple of scars that haven't gone away yet. So the point is that Google needs to quit with this auto pop-up situation. The point is that as we are going through the process of developing new skills, as we acquire new skills, don't try to jump in all at once. You get some new tool, and what do you start doing? Let me play around with it. You start like pushing all the buttons. What does this do? What does this do? You know, the sales guy said it does this other thing, the super advanced analyzer thingy. Like, okay. Well, do you know what the basic functions are? How many times have you got called over by somebody a little more green, and they show you what they're doing? And they've got this super sophisticated, complicated way that they're trying to get something, but it just doesn't quite work right. And it's because they have done something really stupid, like have a basic, their and should have been an or. We've all seen that, right? And if we haven't seen that, then we're still doing it to other people.
Oh, no one says that goes away.
Well, fair enough. So the whole point that we have is that by jumping way into the deep end, without first taking small steps and understanding what the tool does, and more importantly, how we are going to use it before we start trying to do everything all high speed, then we're going to get ourselves into trouble. So as we are developing those skills, don't feel bad or stupid about starting with the really basic stuff. And by God, if you do not code, go pick up a book on how to program in Python. Don't feel like you need to download the language spec and assume that you should be able to read that. Get the book that is Python bedtime stories if you have to. There is absolutely no shame with starting in the beginning. And in fact, if you don't start at the beginning, you're setting yourself up for trouble. So by all means, learn to code, start however small you have to. The other thing is we have to make sure that we know how to report well. We have to talk properly. We have to write well, to be clear, to be concise. It's very easy for us when we're in the thick of things and answering a question for somebody is to talk about the blah blah where this and the cyber doodle that. Nobody cares. What they want to know is what do we know now, what do we know we don't know, and what are we afraid that might still be out there. That's what they need to know. And when you're doing the reporting, omit needless words. All right. As we are developing each of these skills, we start getting to a point where we have not just the one skill, but we start having a whole bunch of other skills. We started doing things like learning how to do fast rope. We were doing rappelling off of a tower. We ended up to the point where we started doing Australian rappelling, the face first thing. So you're running down there and you're controlling your descent with your left hand so you can still shoot with your right hand as you're running down the side of a 50-foot tower. It was a little disconcerting the first time. So we had one guy was afraid of heights. And he got out there with the Australian rappel. And so now he's out on the edge of this thing. I mean, that's high. So you're looking face first. There's a point at which you're kind of like, okay, now you're really depending on this rig to hold you up. Like, okay, and they always do the thing, we start out small, and we get up higher and higher, and you get to the point when you get up after about 15 feet, they're like, okay, guys, we're up high enough now that you can really hurt yourself, so let's not get anybody killed today. Got it, okay. So they tell you all that. Now you're on the edge of the tower. So this guy is afraid of heights. He's doing his Australian rappel for the first time. So he's got his feet right on the edge, and he's leaning out. He's about 45 degrees. And he's like, okay. He looks over at the instructor, and he's like, Sully, I got to come back. It's like, too late now, bro. You can't do it. You got to, that's the way down. And he's like, oh. And so he does it. He goes a little bit further, one step at a time. He takes a long time. He got down there. When it came time for graduation, Sully said, by the way, I have a confession for you. I lied. I totally could have reeled you back in. All right, so we got the skills. We're developing the skills one at a time. But the fact of the matter is that until we actually start putting them together, we're going to be in a situation where we've got individual skills. We need to introduce them into what our MO is. And, we start seeing some pretty fun stuff that we were doing here as well. It turns out that as we get into some of the things that we were doing in preparation for these operations that we were going to be conducting later on in the course, we had to learn not just things like how to shoot and how to communicate and how to navigate and all that. We had to learn how to pick locks and combat swimming and the hand-to-hand combat and all that stuff. Now I thought this is kind of cool, right? Okay, picking locks, that's pretty great. Now the thing is, go back to that business of the role of the team and so on. We got to the point where some of these guys got really good at this. It turns out I'm really good at getting out of handcuffs. Take that as you will. But there are other people who are actually able to do some other things really well. So we got pretty good at this. He was actually really good with the handcuffs too. He did this thing with the bobby pin. It was out, and he was really good. That guy squared away. We had to open these things up. That was kind of fun. And that was again a competition. So we're going through this. We're developing this skill. We start out really small with the simple locks, the ones you can see through and so on. And we're learning about how the tumblers work and how to get a feel for it and so on. But then how to make sure that we are able to do so, not just to get the lock open eventually, but to recognize how to get it open quickly, how to tell when we weren't going to get it, how to recognize who was very good at this versus who was just good enough at it. And this guy over here, Scotty, he was good with his locks. He would just, like, give him a lock. He would, in some cases, get like 10 seconds, boom, he just opened the lock. He got really, really good at it. The point that we had with all of that was not just to develop the individual skill, but to learn how well we could apply the individual skill, how we could integrate that individual skill into what we were doing, so that ultimately we would be able to start tying some of those pieces together in a way that's going to get very confusing, apparently. So that we were actually going through and we would conduct a mission. So we've got the tools, we've learned how to use them, we know how we are going to use them, but then we have to start putting things together. And when you get into a relatively complex mission like the one that we were working on, we had to do a nighttime insertion. So we got transported, so we have to do like a little recce. We had to go get picked up then, we get dropped off somewhere else, and then we have to assault the target. We got to find where the package that we're supposed to get is from there. We got to get out of there without anybody getting killed, and then we got to work our way back. Now it turns out where they dropped us off, we started out in Chesapeake, Virginia. Where they had dropped us off was in Elizabethtown, North Carolina. That was about 30 miles away. And we had a Zodiac. So we had to go do all of our stuff, and then we had to get out of there, and the last word from the instructor is, don't get caught. Don't get caught. Well, should we ask why? No, actually, you know what? I don't want to ask why. We get into some of these things where we're going out, and, we're carrying, like in some cases, we're carrying guns and stuff. Now, when we were actually operating in that particular one, we were in Elizabethtown, we actually had what are called shapes. They're training guns. So they look and feel like the real deal. They're just the right, they're heavy and all that. But, you get 19 guys all cammied up and everything, operating at night. You're not going to be able to tell whether that shape is a real MP5 or what. And so there are people who don't know that we're there. I mean, there's one guy standing out on his back porch having a cigar. So, we're out there doing the thing, guy in front, so everybody, boom, comes down all right, so now, danger, we gotta, what's going on? This guy is smoking a cigar, oh my God, it's not a cigarette. This is not going to be over in 3 minutes. It's get comfy, fellas. Because it's we're not about to go silhouette ourselves and we have to come out of the woods and hey, let's go. Yeah. That would just be bad. All right. So the point is that while we are going through this process, we are learning to integrate all of those individual skills that we had and put them together. And that becomes really important because when we start putting those together, we start getting a good understanding of where we are specifically very good, where we are relatively strong, and where we are just on par for the team. So we can help to organize ourselves and to orient ourselves that way. The same thing is going to be true in our careers. The fact of the matter is not all of us are superstar coders. Now I said, everybody, if you're an engineering type and you've got that sort of thing, you need to know how to code. That doesn't mean you got to be superstar coder. It doesn't mean that you got to be up on every pattern that's going on out there. It doesn't mean that you have to be a language lawyer and so on. The point is that you have to be able to work with it at an appropriate level, and then you'll start finding the things that you're uniquely good at on your team, and that's when you start getting to the point where your team becomes really quite powerful. All right. Oh, there's Shipley right there. He does all of those fake Navy SEAL. Have you ever seen those phony Navy SEAL of the Week things?
Yeah.
Oh, man, he is flippin' brutal. All right, where did my presentation thing go? Hey, Google, what are you doing to me?
Deleting your presentation.
Deleting my presentation, apparently. Hey, brother, you spare a presentation? Wow, did we open up a new tab, or what happened here? Boom, we did. We opened up a new tab. Hi. Hi. Here we go. Hey, can we go back to this, please? Wait for it. Told you I got too complicated. We're present. All right. So as we're going through that, we start learning how to put those pieces together. And then we are going to be able... Whoa, hey. I swear Google's trying to kill me. So this is like the endorsement for their product, right? Hey, can anybody see the top of my screen? Hey. Oh, what's this? What's going on here? Go back to this situation. Hey. There? Yeah, sweet like ninjas. Okay. Boom. Yeah, okay. Boom. All right. Whoa, hey, get back. This is absolutely incredible. So, one of the things that we always need to prepare for is when things go wrong. That was amazing. So, this is a preview of what's coming. Why are you doing that? Hey, there we go.
Let's just
Thank
face
you.
it, Eric Schmidt doesn't like you.
Apparently. Well, I got a few words for Eric. Okay.
Talk to Sergey, too.
So we integrate all of those skills, we start putting them together, and then ultimately we get to a point where it becomes time for us to conduct a training operation. How many of us do tabletop exercises? How many of us have exercises that the tabletop is sort of the culmination of all the things coming together? That's as far as it goes. How many actually conduct exercises where you have to deal with real-world stuff? You actually have to use everything, hands-on everything. Not very many. Most of our organizations don't even do the tabletop. Those that do the tabletop think, oh man, we got it together. Well, the fact is that when you are working in that kind of context, you've got a lot of things that you're assuming. Like you're assuming that the stuff is going to work. And often it turns out not to work exactly the way that you think it does. I'll give you an example of a case that we were working on where we had a whole bunch of things that were going on. We were working, the court was considering a temporary restraining order. We had 30 calendar days to go through the entire company's stuff and try to find the kind of email or the kind of documents or whatever it is that they were looking for. So our job was to go after all of the desktop machines, to go after all the servers and so on. The company said, hey, we'll take care of the email. We got an email archive system. 30 days, 30 calendar days. So we're doing calls once a day. Where are we with all this stuff? I'm on a phone call on day 15. I asked the IT director, where are you with this email? And he's like, well, we got about 5,000 messages out. Okay, how many are we expecting? About 1 million. Well, we're at the 50% mark, so I would say we're a little behind. And it turns out there's this whole big thing. They have been fighting for the last 2 weeks trying to get their product to spit out the flippin' email. And it turns out that it went sideways every time it got up to 5,000 messages. They upgraded the server, they upgraded the software, they've gone through all of this stuff, complete firefighting on their production system because it wasn't working properly. It wasn't until a real exercise of that feature that they saw that was an issue. If they had conducted 5 exercises, they would have known that this was a problem, and we would have been able to deal with it otherwise. As it turned out, they had to drop a whole bunch of money for us to reverse engineer this product and to get it all back together again. All right, so after we've gone through all of this, we've actually done all the stuff that we're going to do. We have done the realistic scenario. Clients that work with us, we take them through the whole thing, including being deposed by a nasty attorney. So you really get to see all of what's going on there and how the pieces come together, so that when the thing happens, you know you're good. You've gone through all of that, and it should have been tough. You should sweat a lot in training, because next you operate. And the more that you sweat in training, the less
bleed in combat.
That's it. The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in combat. So when you go through that training regimen, your team goes through that training regimen, and you know that you guys are squared away, you should be able to conduct that operation with confidence, because you have gone through the process. You're not having to make stuff up as you go, so you can just do the job. The next thing is not to forget, after you've gone through all of that, it is time to reflect. Do the formal after action. In the formal after action, you should know what it is that we thought was going to happen, what actually did happen, what do we wish happened, and then you use that to figure out what your next year's training is going to look like. That's the kind of thing that you're going to do when you are looking always to improve. The other thing is, it's not just going to be that formal after action and so on. If you're working in an environment where you really have to rely on other people, you need to socialize. Probably ought to like each other, because when it comes down to it, you're going to have to know them. Whether you actually like them, that's great, but even if you don't like them, you're going to have to know them pretty well. And you're going to have to be able to rely on them, and you're going to want to respect one another. And that's going to require a little bit of socialization. You're going to have to spend some time just talking. All right, finally, you've gone through all of that. It's time to repeat. Start over all again. So as we go through that process and we are developing our careers, there are some lessons that we can take away, the things that I have seen in my own career, things that I thought about, some of the training that I went through, and the things that we learned how to do. And it turns out that there's a lot of things that have to do with that training thing, lessons that we can take from there that has an awful lot to do. Now, I've been talking from the perspective of somebody who's conducting operations, somebody who's actually down in the trenches. The fact of the matter is, though, even if you're not the engineering type, you're operational, let's say you're policy, you still have an important job. The technical people cannot get all the way through what they're supposed to do if there is a moron in the policy chair. Everybody who has a role in this thing is important. The sales guy is important. Now, the sales guy thinks he's the only one who's important in too many cases. So you pimp smack him, and then you tell him he's still important. Just get it together. Because everybody has to play their role, and they have to play it well if you are going to maximize your chance of success. Ultimately, your individual career performance is going to depend on how well you are able to work with your team. Okay. We've got just a couple of minutes before the next thing starts up. Any questions? What was that about? All right. If you think of anything, if you have comments for me on the presentation, I'm happy to hear them. You can send me email. You can find me. I'll be hanging around for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate talking with you.